is a fabulous student. He is always trying to help me in every situation he possibly can, and he's very positive in our classroom, and I love having him here in our second grade class. He has a lot of great strengths that I want to talk to you about today, and my goal with this parent-teacher conference is just to talk about all of Eduardo's achievements throughout the year so far and ways that both you and I can improve those achievements even more, his strengths, and find ways to challenge him in ways that maybe he's not being challenged right now. And I also want to talk about areas of need for him and ways that we can aid him in his improvement throughout the second grade year so that he's completely prepared for third grade and for his continuing education. So I've been assessing him throughout the year, and clearly I've only had a month so far to work with him, so I don't have a full view on everything that he's gone through in his educational career, but I have been able to sit with him one-on-one in a couple of different situations and kind of see the way that his brain works and to view the way that he thinks about things. And he's very, very bright. He's a very quick child, and he has a lot of great capabilities. So I've done a couple of assessments with him. I've done a couple of running records, some writing samples, and a running record is just a way that I can view side by side a story and then the way that he's reading it and mark down what errors he may be making or the thinking that he's going through as he's reading a story. And I've also been able to work with him on flashcards and in group reading sessions, as well as I got to interview him about what he thinks makes a great reader and what he thinks makes him be able to read, which was really interesting, and I'll share that with you guys. So the areas that he's most strong in is, one, his comprehension. He has great comprehension. He's able to retell me a story detail by detail, action by action, event by event, and he's very vivid in his description, very detailed. For example, I read a story aloud to the children called Tiki Tiki Tembo about a boy who falls into a well and has to be saved because he didn't follow what his mother said. And I asked Eduardo to tell me, okay, what happened in this story? What do you think went wrong? Why do you think the character felt this way? X, Y, and Z. And he was able to retell me every single event in the story with complete accuracy and vivid detail. And he was able to tell me what the characters were thinking in the moment and parts that he thought were funny, and if he would read it to a friend or want to bring it home. So he's very, very strong in that regard, and that was without any prompting. He was able to do that completely on his own without me asking, okay, well, what do you think happened in this part or whatever. He didn't even let me talk. He just loved to retell me that story, so that was great. Another area that he's very strong in is math, and he's very good about expressing his thinking process in math. So, for example, I had the kids identifying 3D shapes one day, and it was a more informal form of quizzing. And I had Eduardo, I gave him a sheet that had like a triangle or a prism, pyramid on it, and a cube, a cylinder, and a sphere, and he had to identify the names of all the shapes, and we had talked about it as a class, but not everybody was completely comfortable with that quiz, and I kind of was gauging to see where they were in their development. And of course Eduardo got them all right. He had memorized a song that we sang in class that helped to identify the shapes, so he told me that he kind of sang that in his head, which is great. He's got great recollection, and he works very well with music, which is also wonderful because we use that a lot in our class. And he was able to get all 4 shapes identified correctly. And then when I asked him, I said, Eduardo, how did you know this was a sphere? And he said, well, it has no sides and it has no vertices. So he's got that comprehension factor in there where a lot of kids would say, I know it's a sphere because it looks like a basketball. He knew exactly the things that I had taught them to be able to identify those shapes, and was able to tell them back to me without any hesitation. So that was wonderful. He's very, very strong in math. He's also very great at identifying word problems. So I'll give him a word problem like, Sally and Susie go to the store and buy 5 apples. They give 2 to a friend. How many do they have left? And obviously that's a very simple example, but he's able to see a word problem and immediately find those trigger words for addition or subtraction and work from the problem through that. And I've been able to help him work on 2-step story problems and a couple of other more advanced things that not all the kids in the class are working on, because he does show that capability to be able to move forward very quickly. And he's very good at catching on to subjects that I teach. And finally, another strength of Eduardo's is that he is able to write very well. And I've noticed that when sometimes his handwriting is not the most legible, but when I tell him that the work is going to be published, I'm going to put it in a hardbound book or give it to the principal or to another teacher, to you guys, his handwriting is flawless. He pays attention to staying within the lines and making sure that it's legible because he wants to impress. And I found that that's a really great way to work with him on his writing, because sometimes it is hard to read what he's writing, but if I make it a more formal situation, he'll try a lot harder. So that's a great strength of Eduardo's. So at home, what I would like to do as far as comprehension goes is I would love it if you guys, when you read to Eduardo in Spanish or in English, I would love it if you could ask him some questions while you're reading of what events are going on in the story, or what I would really like to work on is the emotional side of reading. So if you could ask him, how do you think the character was feeling in this moment? Or how do you think it made him feel when this happened? And help Eduardo kind of get that form of contextualization and ask him, well, how would you feel if this happened to you? So that he can start to see different sides of stories as well as situations in the classroom. I think that would take his comprehension skills to the next level. And I'll do the same thing in class. I'll ask as a class, or specifically with him when I'm working one-on-one, how the characters are feeling in a moment, or just basic retell. I'll just keep working that repetition with him in more complex stories, so to see how he does in those situations, so we can further that strength. I would also like him to be able to work on his fast math skills. He's very good at working through a problem, but I would love it if his speed could up a little bit. So fast math flashcards that say 6 plus 3 on the front side and then 9 on the back side, and just see how fast he can get those. If he can work on those in the car, or a couple minutes before dinner, if you say, hey, you need to get 20 flashcards done before you get your dessert, or whatever you need to incentivize him with, just so that he can work on that timing aspect. That would be wonderful. As far as Eduardo's struggles go in class, he has a hard time with spelling sometimes, and I think it's just because he likes to speed through things. A lot of times we'll use timers and stopwatches in class to keep the kids up on their fluency in reading, or make sure that they're staying on task. But I think he takes that a little bit too seriously sometimes with some of our quizzes, and he rushes through his work. So, for example, if you see in Eduardo's spelling test that I gave him a couple weeks ago, I asked him to spell 26 different words, and he got 17 out of 26 incorrect. And a lot of them are very simple mistakes, and a lot of them are mistakes that are very difficult to explain to a child. Like, for example, I asked him to spell wait, like wait in line, and he spelled it W-A-T. And I know that if I asked him to sound out the word W-A-T, he would say w-at, because he's good at chunking the words and sounding them out if he sees them. But if he hears them and has to spell them himself, he tends to just think of the way that the letter makes in the alphabet. So W makes wa, A makes A, and T makes wait, and he just goes through it that way. And so those words that have silent vowels, or have double letters, like in the word pole, he spelled it P-U-L, because he just didn't think of the double L, which makes a lot of sense and is kind of hard to explain to kids at times. But something I think that we could do to help that would be just repetition with him, helping him to work on his sight word abilities, and helping him to be able to recognize maybe those hidden vowel sounds. We talk about when 2 vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. So just help him to see that in more situations, and to correct him if he's spelling them incorrectly, so that he knows what mistakes he's making. Another area that Eduardo could work on would be during reading. I've done a couple of running records with him, which means I'm reading the story side by side with him, and I think it's the same thing with the speed or with attention abilities, because oftentimes when I'm quizzing Eduardo or working with him one-on-one, it's in a whole class situation, and there's other kids around him talking or working, and he kind of loses focus in those moments, which is fine. He's in 2nd grade. He doesn't need to focus on spelling for 20 minutes, but it does affect his reading abilities, I think. And if you see, I read the story, How We Carry Babies with him, And we went through the story together, and I also read another story called Water with him, and he made similar mistakes in both stories where he would see a word and just look at kind of the first few letters and then look at the picture, and he would just guess. So in Water it says someone, and he said something, just because it fit with the sentence and he didn't want to take the time to spell it out. So just working with him on being able to really take the time to sound each of those letters out, because if I had him like really focus on it, I know he'd be able to do it. He has that capability. But I think sometimes he just wants to rush through it and move on to the next thing. He really does well with incentivizing, so I think he wants to play the games with the kids, or he wants to have time to watch a video at the end of class, so he kind of rushes through that. But Eduardo is a wonderful, wonderful student. I really enjoy having him in class. He's a positive attitude. He really wants to work hard, and he wants to learn, which is difficult to find in a lot of kids. And I know that he speaks Spanish at home, and I think that could contribute to some of the phonics skills that he's missing, just because he does pronounce some letters the way that they're pronounced in most Spanish words, which makes absolute sense. And we have him working with the ELL staff here to be able to have both languages improve at the same rate. But I think that if he was able to just read constantly at home, maybe have some word flashcards, or if there were any situations at home where he could work on his writing, if you're writing a grocery list or a thank you card or whatever, if you could have him write it because he does so well in formal situations, I know that would work with him, because any extra writing or reading exposure will be wonderful for Eduardo. He would respond very well to that, because there's only so much time that we have in class to work on that, so any time at home would be a great help. But overall, Eduardo is just a wonderful student to have around class. He's a hard worker. He really does persevere in difficult situations. And I think that with that extra one-on-one time and with some extra time studying at home, that he would be able to overcome any struggle that he's going through in class, and that he'd be able to become completely ready for third grade by the end of this year, if he just has that extra time to work on some of those things that he's struggling with.